Hey guys, it's Jane. I'm here today to talk about Lee Child's Jack Reacher series. I would say that this is a guilty pleasure of mine, but I don't actually feel guilty about it. But it's not kind of maybe a natural fit with lots of the other things that I read. So I just finished reading number 22 in the series, The Midnight Line, which means I'm fully up to date. Number 23 is out in November, so Lee Child is clearly making a hell of a lot of money off of these. These are thrillers, I believe they're classed as. Each one is a standalone. We get incremental character growth, but basically you really have to have read sort of all 22 almost to be able to see the gradient. Jack, no middle name, Reacher, was a military police officer, and at the beginning of the first book has just retired from the army. He grew up, he was his dad was in the Marines, so he grew up moving from military base to military base, never really spent a huge amount of time in America growing up, and then as a young man was in the army and going from military base to military base then. So it's really only when he retires at the rank of major from the army that he first really spends any real time in the US. He's kind of has these very specialized skills that don't naturally fit into civilian life. He travels light. He doesn't drive. He doesn't have a car. He can drive, but he chooses not to. He'll catch a lift, or he'll hitchhike, or he'll catch the Greyhound bus. But yeah, he doesn't drive. He doesn't have a phone. He doesn't have luggage. So he has the clothes that he's standing up in. He has his passport, some sort of key card to get cash, and a toothbrush which he keeps in his pocket. And that is pretty nearly everything that he owns. The books so far have, there's no kind of strict time chronology with them, but a number of years have passed since he first sort of stepped onto the page as a newly demobbed soldier. These books, they're very, very easy to read. He hit his stride about book 3. So the first couple, there's some questionable stuff about the voice, but by book 3, he's really hit his stride. And the books, although each different from each other, have a very samey kind of quality in a good way. So there's a real comfort read kind of element in that you kind of know what you're going to get. There's only 1 or 2 of the books that have really diverted from the formula. There's one book in which he actually travels to France, which is where his mother was from, and that one is quite different because it's not in America. And a large part of what's going on in these books is Reacher kind of getting down and dirty in the actuality of America. So what happens in these stories is he gets into town. He may have come to see something, or he may just be between, points A and point B, or he may have just been heading, south to get away from the winter, and something happens. Something catches his attention, something that's not quite right. It may be an interaction with some sort of law enforcement personnel. That happens in a number of the books. It may be he just notices something in the street when he's buying new clothes, because he doesn't carry any luggage. So about every 3 days he'll find some sort of cheap ass clothes store and just buy a new set of clothes and then throw out the old ones. So it may be that, it may be a conversation that he has with somebody, but something sparks his interest, and then before too long we find out that there is something fishy going on. And then Reacher just hangs around to kind of satisfy his curiosity, or if he thinks somebody's being done down, he'll stay around because he wants to, make sure that, a person who may be vulnerable in a certain situation is okay. Then everything goes to hell. There's usually weapons come into the situation. Bad guys end up dead, and Reacher catches the next bus out of town. That's the basic kind of rhythm of one of these books. I can't really explain what is so attractive about them. Reacher is a really interesting collection of hypermasculinity and wokeness. So he always treats people with respect, like people who, are kind of not threatening him or threatening other people. He's very competent. He knows how systems work. He'll make a phone call to somebody he knew back in the day and get some information, and he can usually kind of figure stuff out. But he doesn't feel threatened by somebody else knowing more than him about a situation. He especially doesn't feel threatened by women who are in a situation and acting out competently. That doesn't threaten him, which is, quite attractive. He almost always ends up in bed with some woman who, in the course of the story, he's come across who, he doesn't have any kind of emotional entanglement with, but who he treats well. And then some dude, or usually more than one, who needs killing in the course of the story ends up dead. This is where I kind of have to pause with my appreciation of these books, because I really enjoy them, and I find them comforting to read. But the character of Reacher is getting closer and closer to becoming a monster. Clearly there's something like PTSD or something going on with him. I mean, he's not normal, and yet he seems to be largely functional, despite the fact that he's forever getting beaten up. I really wonder what Lee Child is planning, if anything, for a big finale for him. Is he just going to persist going off into the sunset, or is one day he going to get mown down in a blaze of glory? Because he's getting closer and closer to being essentially a street person, a scary street person now. And I just don't know. That's kind of my rambly kind of introduction to the Lee Child, Jack Reacher books. There was a movie starring Tom Cruise, which was actually not such a terrible movie. It just really was not a great introduction to the character of Jack Reacher, because Jack Reacher, the first thing almost that you learn about him is he's 6'5" or something, and enormous, and he's essentially a gorilla, and that affects people who he interacts with in a very specific way, and you do not get that sort of feel of Tom Cruise. But it wasn't such a bad film. I would love to hear if anybody else has read these books, what they think about them. If there's anybody else who's addicted to them like me, lowercase a addicted, that might be an interesting conversation. What is it for you that makes you keep reading them, and what, if anything, for you is it that raises questions? Anyway, that's it for me today. I hope you're well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.